Hi everybody, Beat here. This is the second video about soloing on the synthesizer. As promised in my opening sequence, we are going to explore that simple but powerful guitar line by Argentinian guitar player Murua. He has tons of cool material to learn from, so whatever instrument you play, I invite you to follow his channels on social media. He also has a page on patreon.com with slow versions, tabs and backing tracks. Long story short, I chose this line because it is not technically difficult to play. Mauricio played it with beautiful phrasing, and it is a very clear line that outlines the chord changes nicely. So let's get to work.
Hi. So I see that you have met my virtual alter ego with the funny accent. Not that my accent is any better than his. But anyway, let's get to work. As I promised, let's look at this guitar line by the Argentinian guitar player and guitar teacher Mauricio Murua. Again, the reason why I picked this is because I like it. It's very simple and it's nicely phrased by Mauricio, and it's got a couple of bendings where we can practice the pitch bend if we haven't done that before. Again, if you're playing in the league with Jordan Rudess, Derek Sherinian and Kevin Moore and the likes, then this is not for you. You can give me your tips. But if you've only started to try soloing on the synthesizer, then this might help you. As I said in the first video, pick something simple that's not going to be technically brutally challenging, because you should be able to tick off things within reasonable time. So pick something that's fairly easy to start with, because you need to do more with this anyway than just playing. But more of that later. Anyway, so let's do the homework here. As I said in the first video, this simple line by Mauricio is based on a chord progression: C major, G minor, A flat major, F minor. Now, the homework we need to do is to figure out what chord notes can be maintained through the whole progression, because that's going to be your safe zone. For example, if inspiration leaves you and you're left with transpiration on stage, then you know those notes work throughout and you can play patterns with those notes. They will sound fine. Also, they are your landing points if you play any nonsense that you didn't actually want to play, and then if you land on the correct note, the nonsense is usually forgotten and forgiven. Before we start, I forgot, and I mentioned that in the first video as well. This is always an intellectual exercise, of course, by saying, yeah, root becomes the fifth, or root becomes the 11th, and then the third, and then the fifth. But it's also an ear training exercise by listening carefully. How does this sound? What kind of feeling does that create? What kind of sound color is it? Do you like it? Because not everybody likes every dissonance when we create it. Anyway, so let's start. Root becomes the 11th of the G minor. Very nice sound, for me at least. Becomes the 3rd of the A flat major. Becomes the 5th of the F minor. So that for sure is a very consonant note throughout the whole chord progression. Let's take the 5th of the C. That becomes the root of the G minor. And then the major 7 of the A flat major. I like that. And then it becomes the 9th of the F minor. Also a nice sound. So those two . They are your rescue net, okay? So you can play . That's safe. So let's look at the 3rd now. That's an interesting note, actually. This becomes the 13 of the G minor. This is dissonant, but for me that sounds fine. But now it's the flat 13, and that's very dissonant, too much jazz as far as I'm concerned. And then it becomes the major 7th on the F minor, and that you cannot play that here. So that's not a note you can maintain throughout. You can maintain it for the first 2, for example, but then you have to change. But here, that's another powerful thing for a chord progression, because here you can outline that chord progression nicely by emphasizing the 3rd and emphasizing it on the G minor, where it becomes a bit dissonant, and then you go for a consonant note. For example, the 5th here, and then the root here, right? So that's something you can always play. You can always play patterns like simple but powerful. Good. 7th, also very special here, because on this root chord you have the options to either play Ionian, which would mean the 7th is a major 7th, or you could also play Mixolydian, which means you play a dominant 7th. And that's a very important thing, because if you play the major 7th, that's going to be the major 3rd on the G, so it's not working. You would have to change that. While if you play the dominant 7th, you can maintain. So major 7th only works on the first chord, not on the G, not on the A flat, because there it is the sharp 9, and then on the F minor it's the sharp 11. Not really. Okay, so that's an interesting note as well, right? So you can play that on the C, you cannot play it on the G, so you have to change, and then you can maintain. So if you go for the Mixolydian option and you play that B flat here, then it's 7th, 3rd, 9th, 11th. And that is another safe note throughout the whole chord changes. So you could play patterns such as or any other combination of the 4 notes. That's another safe zone. So those are always good, as I said. If transpiration maintains and inspiration has left, then those things are always a good anchor. Good. Those are the chord notes, root, 3rd, 5th, 7th. As I said in the first video, always look at the tensions. So the 9th becomes the 5th consonant, becomes the sharp 11. Fine. Dissonant, but fine. And becomes the 13, also fine. So yet another note that can be maintained. And now we're building up on the stock, as you can see. We had root, dominant 7th, 5th, 9. So you can play patterns with like this. Next tension, 11th. You can't really play, or at least not emphasize the 11th next to the major 3rd. It doesn't sound too cool. But you could play it like this, for example, but be careful with the major 3rd, as we said before, that needs to go 1/2 step down at some point. So for example. And the 13 becomes the 9th, becomes the B 9th, and then it's the major third that's not working. So to be avoided, except for the first chord if you really want to. Okay? So that's the homework to always do when you do this kind of exercise. So it's not just about learning that solo or that chord progression. It's about learning where are your safe notes. So that means you're not going to just move your fingers, as Dean Brown used to say. Don't move your fingers. Try to hear what you want to play. That's the homework. Now for Mauricio's line, I'll play it slowly. Nice line, outlining the chord changes beautifully. I have programmed a quick backtrack so you can hear the context, what I mean, and then you can practice that on your own. That's only where it starts. If you really want to have these kind of thing manifesting in your A game, so you subconsciously can play this stuff, then you also need to transpose it. I'm not saying through all 12 keys. If you want to do that, by all means go ahead. But typically what I like is to transpose it to D major, B major, D flat major and B flat major. Reason being that you then have two keys that have two Bs and two sharps respectively, and another two keys that have 5 sharps and 5 Bs respectively. That is going to be very good for the fingering, because you will have to figure out, especially those that start on a black note, on a grey note, for those that start on the black note, how your fingering is going to be. And also the other ones are slightly different in feeling because of the position of the black notes in your patterns. So a lot of work, but as I said, this is gonna pay you back if you do it like that.
All right, everybody. So we hit a bit of an audio glitch here. But hey, the good stuff made it through before the gremlins got in, before anybody writes and tells me that when they are on stage, they cannot bother about roots becoming fifths and then thirds and then ninths and so on. Of course not. That is why I said homework. When you perform, you perform. This here is work that has the purpose to make you better, and it requires perseverance. Anyway, happy practicing. And maybe, just maybe, don't kick things off with an Eddie Van Halen two-hand tapping riff. Let's save that for later. Build up the complexity gradually. Let your hands catch up before they file a complaint. Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither was the ability to shred guitar solos on a synth. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to leave a comment, share your thoughts, or just tell me what solo you're tackling next. See you next time, and remember, keep your fingers loose, your patch clean, and your tempo steady.